he talks about the real bills. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, well, we're getting remote here, but that's basically, in the 19th century, goods would be delivered on a ship. So let's say they were 3 months out. You know how you take...
like a bill of lading?
Exactly. Your bill of lading is like 90 days net. And that means that you're not going to get it for 90 days. So those actual paper receipts would trade just as if they were money, but they would be discounted. So if it was 90 days away, it wouldn't be worth as much as if it was 30 days away. And then of course on the day when it was delivered, then you'd get the full value for it. So those bills would trade without any national currency coming into play. No banknotes, no gold. Those things were trading as money. And now we have many things that are trading as money. And one of them is government bonds. And that's why I think we could pay off the federal debt without creating inflation. Because what you would do is you would pay the bond and rip it up. So you would get rid of the bond, which is just as good as money, and you would have real dollars in its place. In other words, you would change an interest-bearing thing, a thing that we, the people, are continually paying interest on, and it's still out there circulating.
Who are we
as money.
paying interest to? I hear when it's said, and I understand it conceptually, but who are we paying interest when we have the conversation? Who's the who? Who do we pay?
Many people. That's the thing.
Who?
It's mostly foreign central banks.
Okay.
They have most of our debt. The Chinese have $2 trillion right now. Yeah.
Okay.
But there are also pension funds and all kinds of funds own government bonds. Banks are buying government bonds.
So you're saying we should buy. Who's the we that we should buy?
Oh, but when a bond issue comes due, they always pay it off. But then they roll it over. So they refinance it. They issue some more bonds in order to get the money to pay off the old bond. Well, I think when the bond comes due, you print the money or, put it into an account and you say, okay, you've been paid, but we're not selling any more bonds. We're going to sell our bonds now to our own Federal Reserve, which is what they should have done all along, was selling, like you said, why don't we print the money ourselves or have our own central bank print it? If we own the central bank, well, even when we don't own the central bank, the Federal Reserve funds government debt interest-free, almost. I mean, they take out their costs, but they rebate the interest to the government. They've done that ever since the 60s.
Listen to the amount of research and detail that Ellen Brown has, who's the author of Web of Debt. We're here at It's Rainmaking Time. Didn't mean to cut you off. Please go ahead. Right. And do we have Michael waiting on Premiere? Is Michael on Premiere?
Michael's on. I am on.
Hi, Michael. Stand by. Just one moment here. I want to let Ellen finish what she said, and we're delighted that you're on. Hold on one moment. Please finish what you were saying.
I forgot.
You forgot what you were saying. See, I cut her off. That's what happens when you're over 20.
You were talking about the Federal Reserve and zero interest.
Federal Reserve and zero interest?
Right.
That they don't.
Right.
They don't
okay.
charge
So
interest.
you could pay off the bonds as they come due. In other words, you just write that money into the account. You tell the Chinese when their bond comes due, you say, okay, your 30-year bond just came due and we've just paid you off. But we're not selling any more bonds. We're going to fund our own bonds through our own Federal Reserve. And then our own Federal Reserve is going to rebate the interest. And they never, ever really pay off the federal debt because the federal debt is our money supply. We have a $12 trillion federal debt, and that's about the money supply. So that money is just out there acting as the dollars in the system. Well, if it's a debt to our own central bank, which we pay no interest on, and we never have to pay it off, we just keep rolling it over. It's the same.
So it's not really a debt, is it?
Right. It's the same
That's
as
what
the
I
government.
said about an hour ago. It's not really a debt.
No, it's just an accounting feature. You just figure out how much money you've spent, and you write that up into the account. And you put the money out there into the economy. And as long as you have goods and services to balance that money, you're not going to have inflation. So the government could, right now, fund all these infrastructure projects that we desperately need. There's so many things we need. We need roads and bridges. They're all falling apart. And look at the teachers and, healthcare. There are all these things that we could fund without creating inflation. We could fund it because we're adding to the goods and services of the economy as we're adding the money. So when supply and demand go up together, you do not create inflation. You just create abundance.
In debt the way they believe in Santa Claus. They simply cannot conceive of this happening without debt. And it's hard to get them off of that.
This is Michael. Michael, introduce yourself.
No, I think that was it.
Was that Jim?
Oh, that was Jim.
Jim, thank you about the Santa Claus thing. But
Okay.
you go ahead and finish that. Finish your sentence, and then we want to
that
have
was
Michael.
it. Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Well, actually, I'm kind of jumping in here, having not been listening to the program. I apologize, and so I'm.
Well, I can tell you what I'd like you to speak to. You were talking about I've forgotten where it was. Was it Virginia that had a bank already going that is a non-profit bank, but it's funded by the government? So explain how that works and why you think that's a good idea.
And just give us a minute, if you can, like a minute and a half intro about who you are and just what your passion is and why you've come here today.
Okay. Well, first of all, in terms of background about myself, that I've been an entrepreneur mostly in the San Francisco area for over 30 years. I've started more than half a dozen small companies and pretty much considered a specialist in how do you start up new ventures. And that as part of the program that we were trying to put together, that we determined we needed a credit component of it. That got me off into investigating the whole banking world and alternative currencies, etc., and found my good friend Ellen and was most impressed with the stuff that she put out. I thought that was the best of the best that I was seeing out there. And I completely agreed with the ideas she was putting out there about the government at the federal or state level getting involved in banking like the Bank of North Dakota. But had my own thoughts about what would work best if we started applying that same concept down to the local community level. That I thought that it would be more difficult for local governments to get involved in the banking, and the alternative there, still maintaining the public ownership concept, we concluded that it might be best done with nonprofit corporations instead of the government doing it. And you still have thus the total dedication to the public benefit. In fact, we call those both the government-owned banks and our nonprofit-owned banks, we're referring to them as public benefit banks. And they convey the idea of that these things exist exclusively for the benefit of society and the economy and not for individual owners. So in the process of trying to do our due diligence and research and building the rationale for our whole program, we've reached out there to try and find other examples of these public benefit banks, and have now learned of two nonprofits that own banks. One in California that's in Oakland called One California Bank. That was the first one we learned of, and that one was actually funded by a husband and wife, very wealthy hedge fund, progressive guy, where they put nearly $50 million into the local community bank that they're dedicating to exclusively serving the needs of the low and moderate income individuals within the community there. And then we found out about this other one that Ellen is just referring to, that was formed by the Virginia Community Capital Organization, which was originally formed as a nonprofit, and they call them a Community Development Financial Institution, or CDFI, that VCC, Virginia Community Capital, was formed in 1995, originally as a micro-lending organization working in 3 counties, and also doing things dealing with low-income housing and things like that. And a decade later, the state partnered with them and actually then provided them with a $15 million grant to form a wholly owned for-profit bank under VCC, which they've now done, and it's called the Community Capital Bank of Virginia. And the whole nature of their program was expanded to go statewide. So what you have here now really is a public nonprofit partnership sort of concept working out. But since it's a nonprofit, they also are open to being able to bring in funds from foundations and socially responsible investors and others that have augmented and added to the $15 million that the state originally gave. And given all of what Ellen so adequately teaches about the idea of the fractional reserve lending concept and how you can take every dollar and multiply it many times over, that's precisely what they're doing to serve the needs of the communities all throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. And one final point, I just today talked with their chief credit officer there to get a better understanding of how they do what they do, and especially their relationship with the other community banks, which, through Ellen, we've all learned that North Dakota serves kind of as the central bank to the states there and the community banks there, so they really don't have a competitive relationship, they have a cooperative one. Well, in a similar fashion, the folks under VCC and the Community Capital Bank of Virginia have structured